Okay, hi everybody. This is Mr. Lamonica here, and I wanted to go over a few of the microscope slides that I'd like you to look at today. Here we have animal cell. We can see nuclei in each cell. They're a little box shaped on this one, but usually the animal cells are a little more rounded than this, but these are actually animal cells. If we contrast those to the plant cell has really square, boxy shapes, and we've talked about this many times before. Differences between plant and animal cell. The plant cell has the large water vacuole in the center over here. It has a cell wall on the outside. It has chloroplasts that are where photosynthesis happens and contain chlorophyll. So some of the slides today involve animal cells, and some of the slides today involve plant cells as well. So the first animal cell that we're going to take a look at is actually a piece of the human body again. This is a blood smear. So what you're actually going to be looking at is a small sample of human blood. The human blood is very old. It's probably 50 years old. It's been dead for a very long time. There's absolutely nothing you could catch from it. And remember that the blood is a part of the circulatory system, which would include our heart, our vessels. And we've talked about before, the human body systems are something that oftentimes students really struggle with. And I can understand there's a lot of them, and they all have different parts. But just to review, we've got the circulatory system. Respiratory system would include our nose, our airway, our lungs. Skeletal and muscular often go together. The muscles are attached to the bones. We have the excretory system. Sometimes people are surprised to see the lungs as a component of the excretory system, but remember, lungs can excrete carbon dioxide. They can get rid of carbon dioxide, a waste product of the human body. It's just a gas. We have the digestive system, which include our mouth, our esophagus, our stomach, our intestines. We have our nervous system, our brain, our spinal cord, our nerves, and our reproductive system. It looks like I left off here endocrine, which is the one that most people leave off of everything. And the endocrine system, remember, has to do with hormones. And hormones are just natural chemicals that cause changes in our bodies. So here we have our blood smear. And the slide you're going to look at is going to look something like this. If we look at it under higher power magnification, we can see that some of the cells are misshapen. And this is something that your teachers last year probably taught you a little bit about. This is a disorder of the human blood called sickle cell anemia. And if you have sickle cell anemia, some of your blood cells are misshapen and shaped kind of like sickles or crescents instead of nice round blood cells. Problems with this are you could develop blood clots because the cells are not nice and round and they're these kind of crescent shapes. They can start kind of clumping together, and people with this disorder are more prone to disorders like strokes and blood clot related issues. It's a genetic disorder that some people are just born with. Okay, the next slide that I want you to take a look at, this is actually an animal right here. This is a little creature called a planarian, and you might have learned about it last year. Maybe you do. Maybe you don't remember. But this is a little creature called a planarian. They're pretty small. They're related to worms. They're actually what's called a flatworm. The earthworm is a roundworm. This is a flatworm. They're small, and they're pretty primitive. They live in the water. They have very primitive eyes right there and right there. They're not eyeballs. They're what are called eye spots, and this creature can essentially just tell the difference between light and dark, where there are shadows, maybe the shadow of a predator that's trying to catch it. But they can't really see in the true sense of vision, but they can detect the difference between light and dark. We have a very primitive stomach over here. It's basically just a cavity, an opening inside of the worm, and on the underside of the worm is a little tube where it would suck water in, extract the nutrients, and then expel the wastewater right out of the same opening. It lives in the water in ponds. And I've heard this, but I've never actually tried it, that if you wanted to catch some planarians, what you could do is go to the grocery store and actually get some chicken livers. And you could attach the chicken liver to a fishing pole and you can lower it down into the bottom of a pond for a while. And from what I've heard, if there are planarians there, they'll be attracted to the chicken liver and they'll swim over to it and they'll start feeding off the chicken liver. And then to catch them, you could just pull the chicken liver out of the water, and apparently they still hang on because they're really trying to eat that chicken liver. I've never tried that. I don't know how well it works or if that's even true. Now, I think the Planarian are actually really interesting. They might look kind of gross, but what's interesting about them is they have the ability to regenerate. And regeneration is something that you learned about last year. If we take a whole Planarian, and if it were alive, and we cut it into three pieces, a head, a body section, and a tail, each piece is going to grow a new Planarian. So a head will grow a new body, a body will grow a new head. This is something almost like science fiction. This is something that humans obviously can't do, but the Planarian can. And that's really great for, if there's a predator nearby and part of it gets chewed, it can still survive just fine through the process of regeneration, which would be a form of asexual reproduction, even though it's not exactly, it's asexual reproduction because each planaria is identical, genetically identical to its parent planarian. So it's kind of a strange way of reproducing. But we end up with two planarians if we cut one in half. Occasionally somebody might ask me, well, does that mean that this creature can never die? We could just cut it up and cut it up and cut it up, and eventually, we're just going to have infinite planarians. It doesn't work like that. We could probably cut this in half several times, and then after that, it's not going to regenerate anymore. So it's not that it can't be killed. It can certainly be eaten whole, or if too much of it gets cut apart, it won't regenerate. And there's certainly many of other things that could kill the planarian, like poor water quality, a lack of food, things like that too. Okay, so one of the slides is of a whole planarian, and I'd like you to measure it and answer some questions about it. Okay, here we have a microscope slide of a plant, and we can see the plant cells right here, square boxy shape, nucleus in the center. And if you look at this carefully, you might notice that some of the nuclei are doing something kind of strange. They look kind of just sort of mixed up or scrambled. And what's actually happening in various spots throughout this slide is the process of mitosis, which is the scientific word for cell division, which means that we actually are having the cells multiply. So we start out with a cell where the nucleus is intact, and then the nucleus starts to separate, like over here, and the nucleus is starting to split apart. Eventually we'll reach a point where we end up with two nuclei in the same cell. They're a little smaller than normal, and then eventually that is going to get split apart and we're going to have two cells. So the cells are dividing, and again, that's the process of mitosis. This is happening in the root of an onion plant, and as the root tip is growing into the soil, the cells are dividing, and that's what's making the root get longer and thicker. We undergo mitosis too. We don't reproduce through mitosis, but we repair and heal through mitosis. If you were to get a cut on your finger, that's going to heal through the process of cell division, and your skin cells are going to start dividing and multiplying, and then you're going to get that cut eventually healing up. So that's another form of asexual reproduction. In the case of us and the root tip, that's not reproduction exactly, because we're basically just growing and repairing, but it's still cell division. It's still the process of mitosis. So that's the third cell that I'd like you to take a look at. Again, the onion cell, the root of an onion plant going through mitosis. Now, the last slide that I want you to look at, I put a diagram up of the 5 kingdoms of life again. And we've talked about the 5 kingdoms a few times. We've got the plants, we have the animals, we have the fungi, the protists, and the monera, the bacteria. The slide that I want you to look at today is of protists. And if you remember, the difference between protists and monera is really essentially in the nucleus. Protists have a formal nucleus. They actually have a nucleus within the cell. The monera, the bacteria, do not. So here's our last slide of the day. These are the shells of protists. So you're looking at kind of like the hard shell of some marine protists. These would live in the water, and they'd be near the surface of the water and collect sunlight and actually do photosynthesis, even though they're not a plant, which is kind of a strange concept. They do photosynthesis, but they're a protist, single-celled organism with a fully developed nucleus. Now, I plan to have another video that's just about using the microscope, and then another video about measuring under the microscope, specifically how to measure under the microscope. So if those are skills that you're struggling with, I'd like you to watch those videos. I think they'll help you when you actually go to do the microscope work. And I'm sitting in the classroom right now, and I'm looking at the microscopes that are out from the last time we used them. And one of the things that I'd like to do is have smaller groups at the microscopes. There are plenty of microscopes. There shouldn't be more than 3 people at a microscope because this is something that you're really going to have to do at the end of the year as part of the state exam. And if you kind of rely on your friends to do a lot of the work for you, when it comes to doing it on your own, you're really going to struggle. So I really encourage you to try to work with as few people as possible and really try to actively participate in working with a microscope. And again, I'll put up multiple videos about measuring under the microscope and using the microscope, common problems students have with the microscope, things like that for you to view as well. So I hope class goes well today, and good luck. Thanks.